All right, and with that bright note, hi Sebastian. It's December, end of the year, and it looks like you've been crunching the numbers, right? I think I'm going to dive right in. I know we have a busy day today, but number one, 2025 is shaping up to be a record breaker. Why is that?
Yeah, and thanks, Leila. Last one of the year. I mean, if we start with kind of the numbers look really good of where carbon removal is going. We had a record-breaking Q2, which in one quarter there were more sales than in all of history before, which we discussed. And Q3 was not as big as Q2, but was the second biggest quarter we ever had. And basically, this year already, the volume overall at almost 25 megatons is 3 times what it was last year at 8 megatons. So there's significant growth there. As so often, it's driven largely by Microsoft. But even if you take Microsoft out, it's decent growth. The one thing that in that report from CDI FYI, which I've quoted many, many times on this podcast, the one thing that they highlight is, or that they show in a graph, is that the number of buyers is plateauing. Like we're not getting significant amount of new buyers, and obviously that's a problem. So the numbers look good, but there are underlying challenges that I know many people out there are trying to address every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, it's one of those adoption issues. As culture understands it more, that will change. To the point of two, which, Johan actually doubled down. Number two is CDR finally getting its moment. That certainly helps because The Guardian actually wrote a good article about CDR, didn't they?
Yeah, it
Or was
was
it?
in the
Yeah.
lead up to COP. First, Johan Rockström, one of the leading climate scientists and really famous for, I guess, his TED talk on tipping points, but many other things. He published a piece about why essentially massive scale up of carbon removal, of durable carbon removal, is one of the key things that needs to happen. The picture he paints is we're going to go into overshoot, so above 1.5. If we do our best with phasing out fossil fuels, decarbonizing, we might stop it at 1.6, 1.7. That's already best case. And the only way to then get to 1.5, which we should still aim for, is through 600 gigatons of carbon removals, in his words. And for me, that was very powerful because Johan Rockström has historically not been a carbon removal advocate. He published very recently in Nature a piece that was quoted widely that condemned carbon credits. And so he's somebody who, if he says we need this much carbon removal, it means something. And then 2 days later, that, but also other scientists and their opinions were picked up by The Guardian. And I was gobsmacked because I opened my Guardian app and it was the top headline. I was like, what's happened here? Like a top headline on the Guardian front page about the fact that we need carbon removal. And that's quite a change in tone from what we've seen historically. It wasn't all cheery, right? Like it was very nuanced, the piece, but still the overall message was we need carbon removal. And so for me, these two pieces of evidence over the last month were very promising because we need to change the tide. We need to get CDR to become more accepted and more mainstream. And this was an important step in my view.
Yeah, and I think people need to lean in on the idea of circularity, right? It's a way to, clean up our waste. What's wrong with that? And I think that's a very unifying message, besides the fact that it is mitigating climate impact. So, in
Yeah.
terms of reaching out, we actually, for the first time, had a pavilion at COP. So, number three, you're reflecting back on COP 30. I know that the pavilion did help with at least social media posts. I don't know how much that helped the wider world, but it's a good step.
Yeah, I mean, COP was quite disillusioning for many people, I think, mainly because the final declaration was almost a step back from where we were in Dubai. It failed to mention the phase out of fossil fuels. It failed to provide a roadmap to end deforestation. There were some big losses in that declaration. And it also didn't mention carbon removals, which was something that, for example, Rockström was asking for. So it didn't look great on the surface. Um, but when it comes to carbon removals, it was a huge success. There was a pavilion. More importantly, carbon removal got its own place in the action agenda. It was mentioned especially in the agriculture section and in the heavy industry decarbonization section. And it was significantly more prominent than in the past. So there, I would say for carbon removal, clearly there had been really great progress. And also what I summarized in the post, because I needed to hear that for myself, and some people maybe did, is if you look at the numbers and you look at, there's the policymakers, there's the multilateral negotiations, but there's also just what the economy is doing. And if you look at some of the stats when it comes to deployment of renewables in particular, they give you hope. Like even just the economic case for decarbonization is becoming more compelling every day. And that's something that I think is very important to sometimes reflect on, that even if the politicians screw up, it's inevitable. Maybe it's not fast enough. That's the problem, right? It probably isn't. But the direction of travel is clearly a greener economy.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's also going to be it will make more business sense anyway, overall. I mean, if we tend toward innovation, if the world tends towards innovation, why would we be stuck in early 1900s tech? Doesn't make any sense, does it? So, and all new innovation, a lot of it is very circular. It's very adaptive to what we call the environment, but it's just basically where we live, which is planet Earth, right? Number 4, you talk about, will the EU keep leading in climate policy? Looks like they're buying credits, but you're wondering what kind of credits.
Yeah, and actually, since I sent this out, there has been an agreement, but it's exactly what was expected. So in line with what I wrote here, Europe is sticking to a 90% emission reduction target for 2040. It's now decided, of which 5% are international credits. We haven't seen the final text, so it's still not 100% clear what this 5% means. It can mean a lot of different things. But we're talking about hundreds of megatons of international credits. And like they say, high quality, whatever that means. The people behind it probably meant cheap reductions because they essentially want to lower the cost of reaching the target. But there is obviously potential to weave in also truly higher quality removals. And I'm thinking nature-based and durable, both. And so this is something that I'm now going to do a lot of work on over the coming months, is essentially rallying the troops behind a common agenda when it comes to what these credits should look like. Because done well, this could be probably the biggest demand side signal for carbon removals anywhere in the world, because we're talking about hundreds of megatons. And so even just a fraction of that for removals could make a big, big difference. So this is something that a lot of people, especially outside of Europe and in the global south, should probably follow closely.
It seems that would help a lot, especially when we get into I'm working on a lot of tree stuff now, and there's a lot of
what tree stuff.
Trees, there's a lot of difference between those removal credits and the additional removal credits, as we know. But anyway, number 5, SBTI's missed opportunity. It looks like a little bit of another ding on the progress for removals. What's happening with that now?
Yeah, that's what I said also in the intro to the newsletter. It feels like a lot of these months, when I summarize them, it's real highs and real lows together, right? But overall, the direction of travel is thankfully the right one. SBTI, Science-Based Target Initiative, there are thousands of companies that have targets validated against them. And there were big hopes about the explicit inclusion of CDR in their net zero standard. And then they released the first draft, which we discussed already in March, and it was not great. And now they released the second standard, and it's a shit show. And it's not in line with science. It basically tells companies, simplifying here, but when it comes to carbon removals, it's basically telling them you don't have to do anything until 2035. After 2035, you may do something. If you do something, we're going to give you a tap on the shoulder. If you don't, so be it. And only at net zero, you need to offset your compensate your residual emissions with carbon removal. And even then, only 41% durable, 59% nature-based, even if all your emissions are fossil-based. There's a lot of things there that are just not great and that are not aligned. And the biggest sticking point, actually, but one that I really think they're going to remove because it's ridiculous, is they say you can't use any credits that are also counted towards a nationally determined contribution by a government. That's not a detail. Every single carbon removal that gets any type of subsidy is counted towards an NDC. And that means all of German credits, all of CSCF credits, all of UK, all Swedish, Danish. And so saying basically, if it gets counted towards an NDC, you can't use it for SBTI, is just ridiculous. And
so why are they doing that? They want additional. What do they want? What's the point?
There's a school of thought that comes out of the UNFCCC and Article 6 and that community. That's very present in some governments as well, like the Swiss one, which essentially advocates that every single credit should be counted only once and should have a corresponding adjustment and should operate within the UN system. And in 2035, 2040, that's fine. But today, there are no credits like that. We don't even have methodologies for that. And the only way to get carbon removals off the ground is when the voluntary carbon market and governments collaborate. It's literally the only way that we have seen it work. Because it's expensive and because the government doesn't want to pay it all and the corporates prefer to pay less. And so I understand where this came from, but it's people who want the ideal state that is going to occur in 10 years. They want it today, but that's not the reality. And so that's something that, in the SBTI, I really hope is going to be corrected.
Well, that will have to be correct, it seems like. Because it's just going to make they're not going to be able to evolve that, right? So, evolve or die. So now it looks like number 6, RIP, Green Claims Directive, looks like that wasn't evolving quite as it should. What happened?
Yeah, we stick to some downers. The Green Claims Directive. I mean, we're going to talk probably about that next month because I did a lot on this in December. But the biggest reason that corporates are not buying is not price, and it's not availability of supply. It is they don't know why they should buy. They don't know what to claim against. They don't know if they're going to get bashed if they buy. There is no clarity for corporates. And the Green Claims Directive was supposed to provide exactly that clarity. Unfortunately, it got killed. Then it had a short revival, and then it got killed again. And so now it's killed for good. And it's a shame because, frankly, this was one of the few opportunities to provide clarity. And I don't really see alternatives popping up. And without that clarity, corporates are going to be hesitating. And so, this is a loss.
So that's what was that 3 in a row? Yes.
Yeah. 3 in a row. But then I put an uplifting one.
There's something goes. Yeah, something's good. Something good is happening. Number 7, Germany.
I thought if I deal 3 punches in a row.
Yeah. Germany, what CDR leadership looks like. So that's something you were involved with, it looks like, right? Or no?
Yeah, I mean, heavily.
Yes, you were. Yeah.
With the DVNE, the German CDR Association, I founded a few years ago, which I chair. Yeah. We've been working heavily on this, and it's incredible. We had already discussed that the government intended to spend 500 million on CDR, but now, as part of the budget finalization by the parliament approved it. And so now there's 500 million for carbon removal, which when I shared this online, immediately the party poopers came and were like, oh, that's nothing. This is just bullshit and so on. It's a lot in the current environment. And it sends a strong signal when Europe's biggest economy is saying, we're going to invest into this technology. And so quite a bit of this is going to flow already next year. And I'm super excited because this is showing. And there's also, interestingly, there's going to be public procurement. And because the US had already selected folks, but then it got axed, and they were closest. No government in the world has ever actually bought carbon removals directly. No government.
Really?
And Germany's going to be the first next year. And that is super exciting because it's the first time that a government puts their own legitimacy and credibility on a carbon remocal credit.
I thought Denmark was earmarking that, or no?
Tons of subsidies, but no purchases.
Got it. Okay.
Canada wants to do it. California had some ideas, but in terms of actually doing it, no government has done it.
Wow. Okay. That's fascinating. I had no idea. I thought the Denmark thing included that, but I guess not. All right. Moving on to also good things. Building a Better World, number 8. You have highlighted another woman in the space.
Yeah, Marta, I hope I don't butcher her last name because I always
That's why I did not
call
say
her
the
first
name.
Marta Sjörgen, I reckon. She is the co-CEO and founder of Pebble, and Pebble is a mineralization company. They just celebrated their 4-year anniversary. Congrats. Big milestone. And I caught up with Marta recently, and it's amazing that, they moved from, small pilots and so on now to fully fledged projects. And essentially what they do is they take CO2 from things like bio-CCS or waste plants and essentially mineralize it into concrete largely. And that's a very, very promising avenue. It allows us to sequester CO2 away without pipelines, without geological storage, wherever it occurs. And Marta has also been very, very active on LinkedIn and sharing progress, sharing some of her experiences. And yeah, I thought that was really worth following.
Oh, I'm going to check that out actually. I probably want to interview her because I continue to discuss CDR obviously with you and others going
Yeah, she's
forward.
great. Should have her on.
Yeah, I will. Yes, number 9. I'm concerned as well. There's no planet B. There's no plan B. Global cooling. Yeah, that's doesn't sound like a good idea to me at all.
I had a fascinating
That's
discussion.
crazy.
It
That's
was
crazy.
such a good discussion with Paul Gamble. Paul, for people who don't remember him, he was the
Mm-hmm.
founder and CEO of Nori, a CDR marketplace that went
Mm-hmm.
bust a year or two ago. And he's one of the CDR veterans. And then he was thinking about creating another CDR company. But then the more he looked into it, the more he felt that CDR is not scaling fast enough. We're not decarbonizing fast enough. What's going to happen to this planet? People then quite naturally find global cooling or geoengineering as another potential solution. And he's been a very thoughtful person because he's been sharing kind of his whole learnings and his whole approach on his Substack. And I had been having great conversations with him, and I thought, let's just have a live conversation where I ask you all the hard questions. Because like many, I am, of course, incredibly skeptical when it comes to the
Mm-hmm.
risks. But at the same time, I find the stigma around this topic completely incomprehensible because
Mm-hmm.
we
Interesting.
could end up in a situation, even if there's a 10%, even if there's a 1% chance that we need the solution, we should be doing everything we can to understand it, to govern it, right, to have discourse on it. And instead what's happening is that even people like Johan Rockstrom, who we talked about before, completely stigmatize it, right?
Well, it's
Nobody wants to have
interesting.
anything to do
Yeah.
with it.
Well, for several reasons, we should look at it only to understand what it is so that you can prevent it if it isn't good. Because if you don't discuss something, you don't know what it is. The other thing is, I was always wondering about the MRV on that. Has anyone even looked at the MRV on that?
Well,
So
yeah,
I
it's a good
just
question. I mean, largely from volcano explosions and stuff like that's kind of what we
right,
base
but I
our
mean,
experience on. It's
but
complicated, but at the same time, and why this is relevant is there's a company from Israel that just raised $75 million that is
hmm
doing this,
yeah, I
and
saw that.
and this is the problem when we don't act as academia, as
Right.
governments, and the private sector just gets going, and
That's
that
what
is
I've
screwed
said.
up. That's
Right.
what is
People are
screwed
going
up.
to that also happens when you have no consensus even on the well, the other, so like CDR, you're pushing back on CDR and then someone's going to overreach on some of these dramatic solutions that someone pitched in some boardroom somewhere and all of a sudden it's happening. I heard that happen once also with ocean. Someone just dumped something in the South Pacific. Luckily, it just created an algae bloom that went away, but yeah, this is
But
desperate
anyway, it's a
times.
topic
You
I
want to get
really
there.
recommend it. It was one of my,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do this more. I have my next one
Mm,
actually in January where I'm going to talk about decarbonizing oil and gas because it's another stigmatized
yeah.
topic. It's like we just
And you have,
assume that
why
oil and gas
not?
is going to
Why
go away
not?
in the next 10 years. It's
No,
not.
absolutely
And so we
not.
might as well make it as clean as possible. But again, I want to have more of these conversations that trigger people, that people are like very
Mm.
uncomfortable with because we need to have them. It's not black and
We'll
white,
talk
right?
about triggering people. I'm doing a little pitch for my, I talked to some Xeon Lights about nuclear energy. So
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
just
grew up in
posted
Germany.
that. I know. You guys, I have images of you blowing up all of the nuclear fleet. But seriously, look at it. It's
I know.
interesting what has happened to that conversation recently. Anyway, so I did that little plug. If you guys can go over to Tree Plus and check that out. I Number 10, when green bashing goes too far. I actually know Patagonia pretty well. So I've done interviews inside the company, and so what in the world are people
Interesting.
bashing them for? They are solid. So what happened? I didn't even see this. So
So I, they released their sustainability report, and for anyone who's
mm-hmm,
seen it, it's just amazing.
yeah,
And
not
and
surprised.
and on my feed, I started seeing posts bashing this report in Patagonia, and that got thousands of likes, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? And so I took a stance, and it went completely wild, and it was very interesting to kind of see also the reactions and what people were saying. And basically, it comes down to there's a growing community. We spoke about this, I think, before. There's a growing community within climate that only accepts perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you expect perfection from a company, from an individual, from a government, you're not going to get anything done. And you're going to always find something to criticize. And Patagonia, yes, they are a fashion company. We can be honest about that, right? Like in fashion, you could say we don't need more jackets. But my take is people will keep buying jackets. So let's make sure that they get recycled as much as possible, that they get reused as much as possible. And Patagonia is really leading on that, right? And so I thought it was an interesting case.
Well, I would say another plug for something I did quite a bit ago, but I did a sustainable fashion series with Amber Valletta for Lexus. Actually, wanted to talk about. Yeah, it was on for digital online, and the first one is at Patagonia, and it's with Rick Ridgway, who's one of the founders with Yvon Chouinard, and actually Patagonia is a fabric company more than anything else. I mean, yes, it is. They provide, I wouldn't even call it fashion. It's a sportswear, and they started as a mountaineering company, and they were fashion. Yvon Chouinard, I actually went to their they have a blacksmith shop where Yvon like makes the stuff for the mountain climbing, right? And but what they're real interested in is the fibers and how to make recycled fibers and how to make that process as green as possible, and also how they take back the material and repurpose it, right? So all of their clothes you can bring back, and then I've
literally just done that 2 weeks ago,
right?
And I was really impressed.
Oh yeah, no, they've been doing this for a very long time, and it's open source. So once they discover a fiber, they won't keep it to themselves. They will actually give it to the industry. So a lot of other people that are working with fiber will actually have the fiber from Patagonia. So we called the episode Thread because it's actually something that I think people don't really understand. And, to the point of people, maybe 11, bashing as a career. I think that a lot of people are, not familiar with the inner workings of a certain industry or even energy or how things get done. And that perfection lens is obviously misinformed because, there is no industry that is perfect. So even the renewable energy industry with what the materials. So I think that there's a maturation process that needs to happen with some of the environmental movement, that we need to understand how, again, I think the way I look at it, I mentioned this before, is how do we put civilization inside the carbon cycle, inside the waters, in all these cycles? How do we close the loops? How do we, Ray Anderson in my very first movie said, we cannot continue to dig up the world and turn it into waste. And that's basically what Patagonia addressed head on a long time ago. So, I love that 10. That's a good one. But we breezed through this this December GigaTen. It has been really great speaking with you this year about these topics, and I look forward.
Thanks for doing this. We've been able to do it every month, and that consistency is worth a lot. So thanks for making it happen.
Yeah, and I'll send the stats. We'll see what we ended up doing this year. Okay.
Excellent.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Leila.